guys all set? Okay.
Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. The microphone's on? Okay. Welcome to the planning board meeting, February 23rd, 7 p.m. Meeting ID and Zoom info is on the town website. You're going to call into the meeting. The number is 1929-205-6099. You can also find that on the town's website. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast, unless required by law. Public input shall be limited to statements from the public relating to any issues with the jurisdiction of the Chelmsford Planning Board that are not currently the subject of a pending public hearing before the Planning Board. Public comment on any pending public hearing shall only be heard during such public hearings. First up, administrative reviews, 5254 Bartlett, a request to endorse.
I believe the applicant's on Zoom.
Applicant for 5254 Bartlett, if you're on Zoom. Do you have him, or?
If the applicant is on Zoom, just unmute yourself and just do a quick presentation.
I can't hear anything.
We can hear you now. Hello?
I don't know that anybody's talking yet.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, excellent. Go ahead.
John, are you on the Zoom?
Oh, that's not good.
So the applicant's trying to speak, but we don't hear him. Oh, he just muted himself. Unmute yourself, John. John is unmuted, but we're not able to hear him.
Do you want to come back to him? I don't.
Any better?
Yes,
Yes.
we hear you.
Got you.
Right, sorry about that. Let me just speak and introduce myself. I didn't hear anything that you were saying. I apologize.
No worries at all. Yes, please introduce yourself and speak on behalf of your property.
Sounds great. So I purchased 52 Bartlett Street about 3 weeks ago. We've been on the market and been looking for a home to build, or an opportunity to build for my primary residence. My children live next door in Carlisle. Stumbled upon Chelmsford and honestly fell in love with the street. I could walk to downtown. And so, make a long story short, I put an offer together and purchased it, as I said, about 3 weeks ago, and went through the filing process, or the permitting process. Submitted everything to Jose, and when I got to Evan, he highlighted that a Form J had expired about, I think it was back in June of last year. And obviously was a little surprised, but spoke to my attorney, Sonia Salami, and her firm, and they instructed me, and she drafted a letter that hopefully you have, just in reference to her opinion on Governor Baker's COVID emergency relief around tolling, I believe. And that is pretty much what I know. And, I'm looking to answer any questions and do whatever I need to do to build my little house that I'll call home for hopefully for quite some time.
Okay, thank you, John. Let me bring you around the board for questions. Henry?
No, I got nothing.
Deirdre? Mike?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I have no concerns. We've seen this before.
Yeah. Nancy?
Is it accurate to say that we are simply reapproving the previously approved Form J?
So
Or has it been modified?
the Form J was never requested by the board for endorsement. This is the first time it's being requested. As John, the applicant, indicated, the project was up for sale for some time. John's the first buyer,
Yeah.
so he has legal obligations to finish executing the planning board decision. The
Okay.
Form J is one of those requirements.
Okay,
All set?
all set.
I have no
All set. So with that,
I'll give you a motion to endorse.
second by Henry. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Thank you, John, and welcome to town.
Great, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, next up, continued public hearing for the Davis Companies on behalf of DIV Riverneck LLC for properties located at 191, 195, 199-201 Riverneck for the demolition of the existing structures and construction of a 247,860 square foot industrial warehouse building with integrated surface parking, loading facilities, and on-site infrastructure improvements. The site is NIA and RB zoning districts and is shown in parcel ID map 64, block 275, consisting of approximately 21.03 acres. The applicant requests approval under Article 24, Route 129 Business Amenities Overlay District, BAOD, and Article 21, Community Enhancement Investment Overlay District, COID subsections 195-111D, 195-115, 195-116, and associated special permits with Article, 16, Aquifer Protection District, subsection 195-74, Floodplain District, subsection 195-82. Major business complex and any other permit relief, including but not limited to Articles 10 and, 4, as may be required under the Chelmsford zoning bylaw to allow the proposed use project. This meeting will focus on the traffic. The project engineer will provide a presentation. The board's traffic peer review consultant will also provide a presentation. The board will ask questions of both consultants. Public input may be taken on traffic. Next steps related to traffic review will be identified, and the links are on the town's website. If you could, Chelmsford Telemedia has asked us to just, proper use of the microphones, make sure that you adjust for the proper angle, keep it 6 to 12 inches from there, just so they can hear it all on TV. All right, thank you, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Robert Buckley, Reamer and Bronstein, counsel for the applicant. I have with me this evening Christine Hung from my office.
That's right, over here. Go ahead, that's right.
The chair is correct that we requested at the last meeting that this hearing be devoted to traffic, and we have our traffic engineer as well as the town's consultant who has completed their traffic peer review. Before we could discuss that, however, I'd like to just spend a couple minutes, it's been a month, to maybe refresh the board and the audience as to what we're proposing, what was discussed, and some of the things we've started to do to respond to some of the questions that were raised and comments raised at the last meeting. As I indicated at the last meeting, the Davis Company is a well-known and well-accomplished developer through most of New England, as primarily focusing on Massachusetts, but their record in terms of performance and dealing with the community is stellar, and they've made a commitment to work with the town to address the issues that have been raised. As the chair indicated, the property is located in the limited industrial district and zoning district, and that district is primarily used for office, research, development, manufacturing, and warehousing. And currently, there are two vacant buildings, the former headquarters for Mercury Computer. We have acquired additional property adjacent to the site, and we'll incorporate that property into the proposed project. This is a summary of our permitting timeline. Back in October, we had the initial applicability submission, then the meeting, December 14th, the submission of the special permit application to the planning board, January 12th, the hearing, and here we are this evening to focus on traffic. The existing conditions, this is as it exists on the ground today. As you can see, there's quite a bit of parking, and what we are proposing, go ahead, Matt. What we are proposing is a repositioning of the property, focusing on extensive landscaping, streetscapes, and trying to address some of the concerns that were raised by the audience as well as the board at the last meeting. In particular, by acquiring the additional property allows us to separate the service entrance exit away from the residential area and also to provide some enhanced landscaping from the streetscape. This is a site as it exists today. What you see from Riverneck Road looking at the site. We have superimposed the building based upon its massing in terms of dimensional height to show what would be visible from that same position. This is taken before, or this is created before the enhanced landscaping plan. Here's the enhanced landscaping plan showing that most of the building is going to be hidden through some layers of landscaping that will react to various times of the season. We have heard both at the original, we had a community meeting, and also at the last meeting, two of the major issues, traffic and use and tenant. As I indicated this evening, we will be discussing traffic, but we also tried to address some of the other issues in terms of safety, landscape buffer and sound, and the loading docks. We have reduced the loading docks from the 52 that are shown in the original filing to 42. We have expanded the buffer to further reduce sight lines. We have surveyed the road, and I'll get into that in a moment, but trying to identify areas of improvement in the condition of the road and creating a new sidewalk along Riverneck Road. One of the things that we would like to indulge the board's permission is to create a neighborhood, lack of a better term, committee made up of perhaps members and the interested citizens who reside in this area, to have a offline discussion as to what are their particular safety concerns on Riverneck Road and how can we, working with the town, try to address some of those as part of this project. We would welcome someone from the planning board if they would, or perhaps someone else from the town, engineering, et cetera, to look at these issues. Again, we're trying to focus on what we've heard consistently from the community, and we hope to address those on a going forward basis as this project goes through the regulatory process. And now I will switch it to our traffic consultant to address what we were going to talk about this evening. Is Matt?
Is he on Zoom or?
Yeah, Jeffrey Dirk is here in the audience.
But do you want Jeffrey to go first or Matt, our consultant?
That's his.
How did you guys have it? Yeah, I think Jeff was queued in for it.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm the managing partner with Vanessa & Associates, and we're the board's and the town's transportation consultant on the project. So I don't know if, have you made a traffic presentation to the board? Oh, you have not. So we've conducted a review of the study that the applicant has prepared. I can answer questions relative to that. It's actually probably better that you hear from the applicant as to how they undertook their analysis. I can certainly speak to our findings relative to the review. So if you'd like to do that kind of first before they go forward. At the outset, what I'd like to mention is just in terms of what our role is as the reviewer for the town. First of all, is to ensure that as the applicant has undertaken their analysis, that it's completed in accordance with a standard practice. So as we look at it from the standpoint of standard practice, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation has specific criteria that we as transportation consultants need to follow when we're conducting these studies. And that methodology really deals with how we go about collecting the data, how we establish the study area to assess impacts, and then how we go about analyzing the impacts of the project on the transportation infrastructure. So our first step is to make sure the study was conducted in accordance with that methodology, and we have in fact confirmed that. So at least the way that the study has been put together, it does follow standard practice. One of the things I do want to mention that's kind of a deviation from the standard practice deals with COVID. As we're conducting traffic studies during the pandemic, of course, traffic volumes and travel patterns have changed significantly. So what we're required to do as we undertake our analysis is to refer back to historic traffic count data. Given the fluctuations in traffic volumes, what Mass DOT has said is that they consider 2019 traffic conditions as existing conditions. We have not gotten back to the level where volumes are at the 2019 levels, even at this point. And so they basically require that as we're conducting these analyses that we're referring back, comparing any traffic counts that we conduct today to conditions that existed in 2019 prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. As the applicant has taken their analysis, one of the fortunate things, at least where this site is located in the town of Chelmsford in particular, is that there is a permanent count station on Golden Cove Road. So Mass DOT has traffic counts along Golden Cove Road historically that go back well over 10 years. It does include data from the year 2019. So what the applicant has done as a part of their study is they've conducted traffic counts in 2021 at the same location on Golden Cove Road that permanent count station is located, compared those traffic counts to the counts that existed in 2019 prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that allows them to develop adjustment factors. So as they've gone about collecting their traffic data in 2021, this comparison of 2021 counts at that count station location to the 2019 pre-COVID numbers allowed them to establish some adjustment factors. And just for context, the adjustment factors were 12% in the morning peak hour. So as they undertook the traffic counts, what that comparison said is that if you did traffic counts in 2021, in fact, if you did them today, you're going to be off by about 12% in the morning, and that the counts today or in 2021 are 12% lower than what they had been if COVID had not happened. In the evening, which is typically when the volumes are the highest, that adjustment factor is 25%. So traffic counts at 2021 when they conducted their data are 25% lower than they would have been had COVID not happened. So those adjustment factors, we've confirmed those, and that's appropriate, and the methodology follows Mass DOT's requirements. So we've confirmed the data collection that they've undertaken to basically that is consistent with what the requirements are. Those adjustment factors are appropriate and they followed standard practices. The other thing they've done, and I know this will be both important for the board and the neighbors, is they've also collected vehicle travel speed data on River Neck Road. And this is one of the focuses as we looked at some potential improvements that we've suggested the applicant undertake. River Neck Road has a posted speed limit of 30 miles an hour. As they've measured the speeds proximate to the project site, they're upwards of about 43 miles an hour. The majority of the traffic is going 13 miles an hour above that posted speed limit. We generally would like to see something that's within a 5 mile an hour pace of the speed limit. This certainly is above that 5 mile an hour pace, so we've suggested just in terms of some things that the applicant can look at for some potential improvements to offer to the town and to the neighborhood is to look at some ways to reduce the travel speeds. So now specifically looking at some of our comments on the traffic study itself. One of the study area intersections that they evaluated, and this is the intersection at 110 and Stedman Street. So if you picture kind of how the majority of the traffic would arrive to and from the project site, especially the tractor trailers, we'll have some coming in from Route 3, some coming in from 495. Probably a significant amount will be coming from 495. Mass Pike orientation or coming from the north if they're coming down from Maine or areas like that. So that intersection is expected to accommodate about 60% of the traffic from the project. We note that because that intersection is a high crash location. In fact, it's listed as, it's on Mass DOT's it's in their top 200 crash locations for the entire Commonwealth. It's listed as number 132 out of 200. So because of that, and because of the fact that the applicants, or this project, is going to be adding 60% of the traffic will go through that intersection, we have asked that they undertake a further analysis of the motor vehicle crashes that are occurring there, specifically preparing what's known as a motor vehicle collision diagram. So that's basically, they take a picture of the intersection, an aerial photograph, and they plot on that photograph where all the crashes are occurring in the intersection, types of crashes, whether they're rear end, angle type crashes. And so what that would do is you look at that diagram, you can get a pretty good picture on, where are the crashes happening, and are there any patterns that are happening in the intersection? Because that allows us to go to the next step, which is, how do we improve or reduce the crashes there? That crash pattern, that diagram, allows for a more educated discussion relative to potential improvements at that intersection. The next thing that we had commented on is their future conditions projections. So as we conduct traffic analyses, we are required to look at a planning horizon that's 7 years in the future. And that 7-year planning horizon, it allows for boards such as this board to review projects, potentially approve them, and then give some time for the applicant to construct the project, and then a little bit of life beyond that. So that as we're looking at impacts of the project, it's not just today and then with the project built, it provides some longevity to it. So if there were conditions placed on the project, either monitoring or improvements, you want to make sure that those improvements are going to function not only the day the facility opens, but that they'll also function into the future. So that 7-year planning horizon allows for construction of the project, get it open, build any improvements, and then be able to make sure that those improvements still have some life to them. So as they're developing that future projection, there's 2 things that they include in that, and they're looking at the year 2028, their existing conditions for 2021. So the 2 pieces that they look at are projects that the town has approved that aren't yet built that may add traffic. So those are just background developments that would be added, so any traffic from those projects. And the other piece of it is just general traffic growth. So if the town didn't approve any other projects in the area, so there was just stagnant in terms of development, traffic volumes would still generally increase. And I just described that as if you have someone in your household today that's not yet of driving age, within 7 years they may obtain their license because they add another vehicle to the road or another driver. So traffic volumes are just going to grow just based on things like that happening, or additional single-family homes, things like that that may not necessarily come before this board. So general traffic growth is reviewed based on data that, similar to what the Mass DOT has for the count station. So if they have historic counts for 10 years, we can look and see how historically, how have those traffic volumes changed, and we can get a growth rate that way. The Northern Middlesex Council of Government also publishes traffic count data. So they have, for the region itself, they have a traffic model, and they have growth rates for the town of Chelmsford as well. So the Northern Middlesex Regional Council of Governments has a growth rate that they use in their modeling for Chelmsford of 0.75%. So that's a compounded annual growth rate. The applicant had used in their traffic study a 0.5% growth rate, so it's less than what's historically been experienced in the town, and it's less than what is being carried by the Regional Planning Agency in their traffic model. So we've asked the applicant to go and see what difference would that make, that extra 25% or 0.25% growth, what would that do in terms of their traffic estimates? So as they're projecting those future conditions, how much additional traffic would that add to the roadway network as they're looking at what impacts may be? So we've asked them to take a look and see what that sensitivity would be in terms of that additional growth rate. The other thing that we've asked the applicant to look at is now dealing with the traffic characteristics of the project. And I'm going to take this in 2 pieces. The first is our comments relative to the applicant's traffic study. And the second piece of this is, I think, some comments that were received by the town with respect to the type of traffic and the traffic characteristics of this project, and how do you go about estimating the traffic from the project. So the project is a warehouse type of facility. It's going to have employee-related trips, and it's going to also have truck traffic that's associated with it. The applicants provided traffic estimates for just the overall amount of traffic the project would generate. So basically combining those two things together and giving a total number. We have asked the applicant to split those numbers out so that as you're looking at the project, and as members of the town are as well, you can see the amount of employee trips that are expected to be generated and the amount of truck traffic, because the truck traffic is always a sensitive area when you're looking at any type of project. So I think it's important that the applicant aggregate that and break those numbers out so that you can see what the differences are on those. And that's important as well as we were talking about the distribution of traffic. So your employee distribution of traffic, or how employees, or where do employees live and how do they get to the site, is going to be much different than your truck traffic. So employee trips, you generally are going to expect they're using the local roadway network. There'll be some on 495 and Route 3, but predominantly you're going to see them using more of the local roads. So there's going to be a local focus in terms of how that traffic is distributed. Truck trips are the opposite. So truck trips are going to find the quickest way to get to the interstate highway system. So they're trying to get to, down to Route 129, getting over to Route 3, or 129 to Golden Cove Road, and then getting on to the 495 interchange. So that's going to have a distinctly different trip pattern than just the employee trips. The way the applicant has looked at their trip distribution is it's similar to the trip generation, it's all one. So it doesn't show that aggregation of truck trips so that you can see where are the truck trips coming from and going to, and where are the employee trips coming from and going to. So we've asked for them to split that out so that you can see what the difference is. We did not take exception with the trip estimates for the project. So the overall amount of traffic and the way they've estimated, we've agreed with the methodology that they've used. So that gets to my second part related to trip generation. So there's, as the board is well aware, there's a lot of warehouses. In fact, with COVID, there's been kind of a significant expansion in terms of the number of warehouse projects that you're seeing throughout the Commonwealth. In fact, our office is working on, at any one time, we might have 5 to 10 of them that we're undertaking studies, both us conducting the studies as well as doing peer reviews similar to what we're doing for this project. As we're looking at traffic characteristics for warehouses, if we don't have an end user, so if we don't have Amazon coming in and saying, we want to build a warehouse, once we know that, the end user, we can easily estimate the amount of traffic because we just need to know what type of warehouse is Amazon planning for this site, and we can develop traffic numbers. When the use is not known, but we know it's a generic warehouse, we basically look at 3 different types, or actually 4 different types of warehousing facilities from the standpoint of generating traffic. So I'm going to start with the first 2, and one of which the applicant uses. So there's general warehousing. So general warehousing has loading docks on one side, product comes in by way of tractor trailers. It may be stored for a longer time period. It may be broken down into smaller deliveries, and then trucks may come in and transport those. But it's really only done on one side of the building. So that's a standard type of warehouse operation. There's also cold storage warehouse. Functions the same way, but as the name implies, it's cold storage. So we're bringing in refrigerated or frozen products. Those 2 uses have very distinct traffic characteristics. In fact, the cold storage warehouses are very low traffic generators. They generally don't generate a significant amount of traffic because they're storing the product for a longer time period by virtue of the name, a refrigerated cold storage warehouse. Now we get to the more traffic-intensive uses. So the traffic-intensive uses as they relate to warehousing, we have the parcel delivery hub or the delivery station. So that's where you see those little vans. They're coming and going. Either it's a UPS facility, which I know the town's familiar with, that you have one of those, or those Amazon last mile delivery centers. So those are your parcel delivery centers. So those are generally small-sized buildings. They generally range in size from 130 to 150 square feet. And I think as you're looking at a site plan, if someone presents a site plan to you and you see a building about that size, the key thing in looking at whether it's going to be that type of facility, there's 2 pieces to it. A significant amount of parking, because what they have with those facilities is the vans get parked at the facility and stored there. Then the drivers come, they get the van, pick up their packages, and then head out and they leave their personal delivery there. So generally what you're going to see is they need 2 to 3 times the amount of parking that you'd have for a standard warehouse, and you're going to see larger size parking spaces because they need those to store the vans. So for a facility that's about, let's say, 150,000 square feet, you're going to see somewhere around 500 parking spaces. It's just going to be something that'll be striking to you because you're going to see that by virtue of the number of parking spaces, this is going to be an intensive use in terms of its activity. So as you look at this site plan, it's not one of those. The other thing to look at is All of those facilities, the vehicles drive into the facility. So not only are the vehicles coming from the parking lot, you'll see doors on both ends. They drive in, they get loaded, and they drive out the other side. This building, again, as you look at it, doesn't have any of those features. It's not set up to have a vehicle drive through it. So the size of the facility, the number of parking spaces, and the layout of the building itself are not conducive to something that would be of that nature. And the next warehouse size, or the last one, is your high cube fulfillment centers. So these are broken down into sortation facilities and non-sortation facilities. And these are your typical, Amazon, Home Depot has these, Walmart has these as well. They're all coming into this area. In fact, Home Depot is going to be building one on the Tewksbury-Bill-Ricka line. In fact, half in, half out of the community. Those are well over 1 million square feet. So they're very large facilities. The non-sortation facility is a warehouse facility that generally, as it's described, there's no sortation that takes place. So that's where you get larger size products. They're generally about 18 inches square. They're not able to be handled by robotics. So that's a distinct difference. So they're very large products, and that's what's handled at a non-sortation facility. They still tend to be close to about 1 million square feet. So those are washers, dryers, refrigerators, microwaves, those kind of things are processed in a non-sortation facility. And then you have the sortation facility. Sortation facilities are heavily robotic. They tend to be about 5 stories or more in height. There's a lot of conveyors and robotics that happen in those facilities, and there, as they described, it's sortation. So that's your typical, you place an order on Amazon of a bunch of small things. That goes out to the sortation facility. Those robots zoom around, pick up everything, put it in a package, and then you get it delivered. And that's why they're always trying to keep the number of boxes going to your house small, because that's the way the sortation facility works. The robots are picking these all up and delivering them. Those are generally close to about 3 to 4 million square feet, and they're somewhere between, as I said, about 4 to 5 stories in height to handle all of the conveyors. You generally have 2 shifts. They generally run about 1,500 employees, about 750 per shift. So again, very traffic intensive. So as you look at this building, it's not designed for any of that type of facility. In fact, again, with those number of employees, you couldn't park all of those at the site. So that brings us back to, what do you use for trip generation? So from the standpoint of looking at all of those uses and kind of eliminating what the facility could actually accommodate based on the way it's designed, generic warehouse. And that's what they've used for this. The generic warehouse, based on the size of the facility, actually produces what we would say is more traffic than a cold storage warehouse, less traffic than a sortation facility, just given the size of the facility. It would be in line with a non-sortation facility, and then it would be something less than the parcel hub or the delivery station. But again, as you get to a discussion on parking, I would suggest that to the extent that you're comfortable with the amount of parking they've shown with the land banking taking place, you've physically limited what they could do with the site. So if you're comfortable with that, with the number of parking spaces, they could never have a package delivery station here just because they don't have enough parking. So I think that that's something that, I discussed even in an email with Evan about the fact that you can put conditions on this to make sure that you don't end up with one of those type of facilities. But certainly getting to a point where you're limiting the amount of parking physically means they could not accommodate that. Usually they'd have to come back to you to ask for more parking to the extent that they wanted to have one of these more intensive uses. So a very long way of trying to get to the fact that we're comfortable with the way they've estimated the traffic. We think the amount of parking they've proposed is commensurate with the amount of traffic that they're predicting for the project site, and that if they wanted to do one of those more intensive uses, it's just not designed for it, and they would have to make significant changes to the site plan that would require them to come back to you. But we can certainly structure some conditions to the extent that you would like those to make sure that you get what's being presented to you, which is really just standard warehouse. I'm sure there'll be questions on that. I'll be happy to answer those when I finish with my presentation. So our next set of comments deal with the analyses that the applicant has conducted. From the standpoint of the impacts of the project, it's going to produce somewhere between 50 and 60 peak hour trips. So if you imagine 50 or 60 trips coming out of the site, the majority of it's heading south. There's a small amount that's heading up towards Lowell. Bring it down to River Neck Road and 129, then some of it's going left or right from there and then dispersing itself. Those numbers start to get really small. So what we're seeing in terms of impacts is it's a really minor impact. And minor impact what we're seeing in terms of increased delays is somewhere around 2 seconds of additional delay. So it's not something that really trips the needle as to having intersections that are operating fine going to a condition where they're operating over capacity. So none of that shows up as a result of their analysis. That being said, there were some anomalies that we've asked them to go and look at, and there are things that, as we look at kind of drilling down in the details, they've added traffic to intersections, and contrary to what you would think, it shows some improvements. And so that doesn't make a lot of sense to us. We do understand how that could happen with respect to traffic signals, but we've asked the applicant to go back and look at a couple of locations where delays actually got better, even though the traffic volumes went up, and queues were reduced, even though the volume of traffic went up. So it's just one of those things to go back and ask them to do some homework, check on that, make sure it's being reported correctly. We don't think that that's going to change the overall findings of the traffic study. However, that's something just in terms of housekeeping that they should go back and make sure that the modeling has been done correctly at those locations. In terms of looking at the site plan, we do have some comments on the site plan, not anything significant, but one of those items that we've asked the applicant to look at is site distances at the driveway. They have measured sight lines at the driveway and demonstrated that the sight lines are appropriate for someone who's driving and approaching the driveway at speeds of in excess of 45 miles an hour. So we know that the travel speeds are 43, so they have sight lines that far exceed what's needed for people that are driving 13 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. So that says to us that the driveways can function in a safe manner with respect to sight lines. But one of the things is we're looking at a warehouse facility, and then again focusing on truck traffic, is trucks, as you know, need a much larger gap or a longer time to pull out of sites. So we've asked the applicant to redo the site distance analysis, making appropriate adjustments to account for their large trucks, because they need larger gaps between vehicles to pull out, accelerate up the speed, as we all imagine. So we've asked them to do that. We still think that there's appropriate sight lines for that type of activity, but we've asked for the applicant to just verify that that's in fact the case. And then lastly, with respect to the traffic study, is recommendations. So in the traffic study itself, there were no recommendations. So we've offered, just in lieu or before the applicant responds to our comments, we provided a series of recommendations that we've asked them to consider implementing as a part of the project. The first one focuses on the Route 110 Stedman Street intersection. Specifically, we've suggested that the applicant commit to undertake what's known as a road safety audit. You may have had those done elsewhere in the town, but a road safety audit is a separate study that's done specifically at that intersection that's focused on safety. It involves the town planner, police and fire department, the regional planning agency, and Mass DOT. Everyone goes out to that intersection, and a design charrette is held, essentially identifying, what type of crashes are happening, what are those potential causes of the crashes, and at the end, it's basically delivery of a report that says, here's a series of recommendations that should be undertaken at the intersection to address safety. What the road safety audit does is it allows the town to unlock state funding for improvements at that intersection. But the first step to do that is this road safety audit. So we've suggested that at a baseline level, the applicant should undertake that study as a condition of the approval of the project to the extent the board is inclined to do that and act favorably. But that, again, it's something that allows the town to leverage state funds, but you need to have that done first. So that's what we've asked that the applicant undertake. We've also suggested that the applicant undertake some retiming of traffic signals. Even though the project doesn't have a significant impact, there are a few intersections where specific movements are operating at or over capacity. And so some retiming of those signals would be beneficial at those locations. So we've specified the locations and asked the applicant to look at undertaking those improvements. Focusing on the speed on Riverneck Road, we have asked the applicant to look at undertaking traffic calming measures on Riverneck Road. We're not suggesting that speed humps or things like that be undertaken. We don't think that that's necessarily appropriate. However, speed reduction measures, at a minimum, looking at like a radar speed feedback sign, some enhanced signs or pavement markings, something to, as the applicant had talked about having a neighborhood improvement association, these are really things that they're trying to create a street that's more neighborhood focused. Get the speeds down, make sure it's more conducive to a neighborhood environment. So we've asked the applicant to take a look at potentially implementing some measures along those lines. And then lastly, a transportation demand management program. So this is a series of measures that would be undertaken by the tenants that are really geared towards encouraging carpooling, van pooling, things of that nature, walking, biking, hiring locally, things like that that will reduce the amount of traffic, hopefully, that are at the site and keep the parking demands down. So we've laid out a series of measures that we've asked the applicant to consider. And then lastly, our comments on the site plan. There are not many relative to the site plan. We think the site plan was very well prepared in a very professional manner. So our comments on the site plan deal with making sure that the trucks can circulate within the site, so providing a truck turning diagram so that the board can see, how do the trucks maneuver within the site? Are they able to maneuver without driving through parking spaces? Can they get to the loading bays? Things like that. Some signs and pavement markings to be added to the sign. We've suggested that they consider providing sidewalks both within the site and then extending out to Riverneck Road. There are no sidewalks on Riverneck Road today, but that doesn't mean in the future that there may not be some added, especially in looking at kind of a neighborhood focus of the street itself. So at least providing some connectivity for future sidewalks we think is important. Last comments really deal with some signs and markings, as I mentioned, some site distance maintenance recommendations for notes on the plan. And then lastly, bicycle accommodations within the site, so bike racks at appropriate locations. And then just for the applicant to consider adding electric vehicle charging stations within the project site. So that concludes our peer review. I did have a chance to speak with the applicant's traffic engineer to go through each of these comments. I don't think there's any objections or to what we've asked them to do. I think it's a fairly straightforward set of comments, and they've agreed to provide the requested information. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have now or later on tonight.
No, let me bring it around first and see if there's any questions. Henry?
Thank you. In my 9 years, it's been one of the best peer reviews I've heard in a while. That was really good. Thank you.
Henry, if I could ask, could you pull the mic towards you because they can't hear you?
Oh, I just said that's one of the best peer reviews I've heard in 9 years. It was very professionally done. Thank you very much.
Well, this is my first peer review, so I don't have any, it's going to be probably a high bar. But I'm just wondering on is there interplay going forward? Like you asked for certain things and then you told them what you were requesting, and then will you interact with them in terms of helping us know that all those things were appropriately done?
Absolutely. So we've had an initial contact with their traffic engineer, received our comments. I had a chance to look at them and then contacted me to go through each of them to ask any questions and then provide to me kind of their thoughts on how they would respond. So that first interaction has taken place. Our expectation is there'll be written responses provided to these, which they've committed to do. We would review those and then provide a subsequent letter to the board, hopefully indicating that they've addressed the comments and then offering the board suggested conditions to the extent that we're at that point.
Perfect, thank you.
And Jeff, this is Zach Chorniak. I'm in remote land that folks can hear me. From Ty and Bond, we are the traffic engineer for the Davis companies. I just want to jump in and say the comments are really good, great description of the project. And you're correct, we are looking through the comments and intend to address every single one of them in a more formal fashion, before the next meeting, and appreciate the insight and the added benefit that you provided.
Thank you. Mike, question?
Again, thank you. That was a great presentation, very detailed. Did you take a look at the Riverneck Road intersection right at 129? You talked about Stedman Street, but you didn't mention Riverneck.
So it's not, so in terms of Riverneck Road, it's not a high crash location. We know it's being reconstructed or is pretty close to being done with the reconstruction that's taking place there. So in terms of the impacts there, if you're coming from Riverneck Road, even with the addition of the extra lanes there with the left and right turn lane, it's still going to be over capacity. So that's a level of service of F. So it's a failing condition. The amount of delay increase that the project added was about 6 seconds of additional delay. I think the important thing is, that delay is important, but it's a matter of if you're a resident, when there's a queue of cars backed up there, how much longer is that going to get? From the standpoint of the analysis the applicant has undertaken, the increase in queuing was on the order of 1 to 2 additional vehicles over the course of the hour. So it wasn't significant in terms of how that would change. However, it is going to be a condition similar to what you have today, which is it's difficult to make a left-hand turn, and there's delays associated with that.
Will there be a light at that location?
There will not be. Yeah, there will not be, and unfortunately, well, I'll say unfortunately, but it doesn't meet the state criteria for the installation of a traffic signal. So there's state and federal warrants. There's 9 warrants that are reviewed for the installation of a traffic signal. You need to meet at least one of those 9 warrants, and they're really based on the volume of traffic going through it's volume of traffic and crash experience at the intersection. It's not a high crash location, so the crash experience isn't met. And the volume of traffic, although it's difficult to turn when you're coming from River Neck Road, the volume of traffic is not at such a high level that it meets the criteria to install a traffic signal. So the addition of the turn lanes that have been provided, that's probably the best improvement that could be done at that location.
Okay. And the last question I have is the width of River Neck Road in certain areas get very narrow. And is there any requirements on when a major warehouse goes onto a road of that nature that widening of the road is recommended?
I think the road is wide enough to accommodate the amount of traffic. The issue with respect to the road width is that we already have high speeds, so we wouldn't want to do that. More of what would be suggested is sidewalks, things that if you're going to have that type of traffic on the roadway, and especially if you have an increase in truck traffic, that's where you really want to get to adding these facilities so that you can separate those modes of traffic so that it becomes more comfortable for not only pushing the traffic away from the residents because now you get a sidewalk out there, but also for walkers and bicycles. So you really look at it, adding those type of amenities rather than widening the road beyond what's there today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mike? Yeah, I'd also like to thank you. Very complete presentation. I learned a fair bit. Do you see, or did you see in your work, any real opportunities to improve the 129 River Neck Road situation? You point that it's kind of failing, at least in for some parameters.
So I think in terms of what you would do, the kind of the next level up of improvements would be looking at, maybe extending those turn lanes to the extent as you could. But I know it's wide at the intersection, and then it narrows up pretty quickly with the cemetery on one side. I don't know that there's much else you can do there to improve it. The next thing in terms of looking at traffic control would be, if you can't put a traffic signal in, you start to look at alternatives. Those alternatives would be a modern roundabout or something like that so that you can process the traffic more efficiently and slow it down. I'm not sure, given the environmental situation there, that's something that would work. So I think it's really one of those things where you need to manage the traffic that's there. It's not monitor it and I think look at it and see if there is the need for anything additional. But if all that you experience is some additional delay, but you don't have queues that are getting back to 10, 15, 20 vehicles, it probably can function. Just want to make sure it's safe.
Okay, great, thank you. And the other thing is, clearly, sidewalks up there would make a difference.
Yes.
Now, that's a whole other can of worms that we have not yet opened, but we should probably have a discussion, at least amongst the planning board, about what that might look like if we were to take some steps in the direction of improving the sidewalks, or putting them in the first place.
Thank you, Mike. Just quickly on that, at UPS, I think they had a police officer directing traffic.
Yes.
Is that something at this location you think would be needed with the amount of traffic that you're anticipating?
Not based on what they're anticipating for the warehouse facility. So they're directing the traffic up at the 129 where the rink is, right, up at that intersection there. I think more, and this gets back to that type of warehouse facility, the issue that you have there is those surges in traffic because they have those high employment levels that you have the shifts changing over, and all the vans leaving, in fact. When you start to have that type of a situation, there's that peaking that happens where you need either a traffic signal to control it or a police detail officer. This traffic is much more dispersed in terms of the amount of employees that will be there, as well as the concentration and how those shifts would work. So I think that's the different dynamic. So I don't think this project, as it's currently proposed, would rise to that level.
Yeah, I would also like to thank you for an excellent presentation. The question I have, I'm not really concerned with this project in terms of overall additional traffic, but I'm really concerned about putting large truck traffic into residential areas. And with the delays at the River Neck Road 129 intersection, do you see those delays as being significant enough that it would instigate the truck traffic to head the other direction on River Neck Road to get out of there and therefore go through an even more extensive residential area?
I don't think so, and the reason I say that, and this is one of the reasons why we've asked the applicant to segregate out that truck traffic so you can see the volume of truck activity that they're talking about as a result of the project. So I think that'll give you kind of a sense as to how much truck activity we're talking about. With respect to looking at that type of activity, given the size of the warehouse, one of the things to think about from a practical perspective is they can only process so much product in this facility. So the number of trucks that they can receive it's not a large number. It's actually a relatively small number, and they'll show you those numbers when they break it out. But they physically only have a certain amount of capacity. This is unlike your UPS facility where big trucks are coming in, and so it's different. Truck drivers, they want to find, as I said, we'll say the quickest way, but the most efficient way to get to the interstate system. So coming out and turning left and heading, north towards the Lowell area is not the quickest and most efficient way for them to get to the highway. So I don't see that that's really going to be a situation that you're going to have that. I think most of the truck traffic, unfortunately for the residents to the south, I guess, on River Neck Road, that's where it's going to be coming and going. The quickest way to get to Route 3 or 495 is 129 and then going either left or right down at River Neck Road. If you travel north into Lowell, they're just going to get lost. They try to find it, yeah.
But you still have the problem of them going down to Golden Cove and across to get to 495.
Correct. Yes, and that's why where we've suggested the retiming of the traffic signals deals with those type of truck movements that would take place. And again, that road safety audit becomes more important because we're adding trucks to an intersection that's on the state high crash list. So it's really something that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
My question would be, did you calculate this through square footage or bays?
Square footage.
Okay, because there was a reduction in bays being proposed.
Yeah, and that really gets to the processing facility, the capacity of the facility to accommodate the incoming trucks. So as the number of bays go down, again, it gets to that limiting factor. If you limit the bays and you limit the amount of parking, all of a sudden you're creating a facility that you are more or less of dictating how much traffic it can produce because it just physically is not able to produce the type of activity that would generate a large amount of traffic. So those all head in the direction of saying, the traffic numbers are, appropriate for what they're showing on their site plan.
Okay. Great job, by the way.
Thank you.
So, Erica, are you on Zoom?
She is on Zoom, yes.
Erica, would you have any questions, or do you have any questions?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, thank you. What if it was an existing computer company now? Do you take into effect on that traffic, and, what would be the difference?
So, and the applicant presented this in the traffic study. They're showing a reduction. I would describe it as it's comparable. I think what you're going to experience would be similar to it being fully occupied with what was there previously. Any reduction that they've shown is nominal, 10 to 20 trips over the course of an hour. So what I would say is it's comparable. One of the things is we've asked them to look at that truck activity was also to provide that level of context as it relates to the former building. Even just an office use has deliveries and trucks coming in and out of it, not at the same level that a warehouse would be, but I think it's important to understand as well that, trucks were servicing that site. And so there was some activity associated. It might not be at the same level, but still there were truck activity. But from an overall traffic perspective, it's going to be comparable, and their analysis has shown that.
Okay.
What I'm seeing is a big difference.
To some extent, but what I would say is that
I'm looking at page 5 here. Proposed warehouse.
well, yes, on page 5, if you look on the far right-hand side where it's A minus B, what you see is, on a daily basis, you're correct. But during those peak hours,
Okay.
What you're seeing is it's about 18 vehicles difference and 18 in the morning difference and 1 in the evening. But you are right, on a daily basis, it's showing a significant reduction in traffic. And the reason for that is because when you have an office building, it's generally, the employees come in, but you've got visitors and other things happening over the course of the day. When the warehouse facility is operating, your employees come in, and then really, once they're in, it's steady state. Trucks are coming in, delivering product or bringing the product out, but the employees are there working within the warehouse, and then they leave at the end of their shift, unlike the office building. And so that's why that daily number shows a significant reduction.
But overall comparable.
During the peak time periods, which is when you're going to see the impacts, generally if you're bringing your kids to and from school or you're driving to and from work, those are the time periods when you're going to experience what this project would be in relation to the office building, and it's generally comparable during those time periods.
But the types of vehicles would be completely different.
Correct.
Trucks, right?
Trucks.
You're going to see more larger type of trucks than what you would have for an office building.
So, I'm sorry, I forgot a question that I have. At Golden Cove and 129, I haven't been driving it lately, honestly, but it used to be backed up, like, all the way to Stedman Street, which I think probably contributed to that dangerous intersection issue, because people are trying to, get across.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, the vehicles will be so much larger. So if you have like bumper to bumper traffic on Golden Cove already at the busy times of the day, and then you add in even a small number of very large vehicles, it seems like it could have an oversized impact on that part of the traffic pattern.
So two things related to that. That is one of the locations we've suggested that they undertake some traffic signal timing changes. So we're trying to address that situation that's taking place. The majority of the trucking activity does not occur during those peak time periods for a couple of reasons. It really deals with, number one, the trucks don't want to be in the traffic because it's very difficult for them. You'll see them on 495 going to and from places, but you generally will not see them driving on the local roads making deliveries during that time period. So during the peak time periods, what you'd see in terms of truck activities is going to be very nominal, if at all, because they don't want to be there. Most of the trucking activity will occur before the morning peak hour and before the evening peak hour. And then you'll have some midday activity, but outside of those time periods, and specifically during the peaks, generally those trucks won't be there. And I think the applicant can provide some numbers, but we can also provide some data or review data they provide that would show that your trucking activity during the peak periods is really nominal.
Thank you.
Okay, lastly, the resident mentioned a code that they were doing a study on. Do you feel comfortable with the size of the building and everything that you have, what they would be able to do there?
I do, yes. So the land use code that they're referring to, it's land use code 150, which is general warehouse. That's what they've used for this type of facility. Based on the size, the layout, that's the appropriate land use code for this type of facility. And it does produce traffic volumes that are higher than some of the other land use codes that they could have used for a warehouse facility, but not as much as one of those large 1 million square foot warehouses. And I think the key thing is you're looking at those land uses, as we're looking at the data that we use to generate traffic, and we're talking about those land uses, it's data collected at similar type of facilities. So if it's a parcel or if it's a fulfillment center or sortation type of warehouse, data has been collected in a number of those facilities. They provide it to us, and it's plotted in a graph. And you could look at the data, and what you'd see if you looked at the other land uses, again, looking at the sortation facilities, you'll see that all of the data for those facilities, every one of the facilities is over 1 million square feet of space or larger. So as you look at this project, it's not representative of those kind of facilities. So one of the things you have to look at is, yes, the land use code, is it appropriate for the plan that's before you? And then looking at the data that's been collected to see if it's representative of what you're looking at. And so that land use code 150 fits what is proposed perfectly. And so that's why we agree with the methodology.
Okay, thank you. And anybody else? No, that's it? All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have questions online.
Yep, we're going to get to you.
Thank you.
Are we going to go to?
You can go to the public, sure.
Yeah,
You want public or?
public?
Yeah, we'll-
Or do you want to go
but
to the
since-
applicants?
Since both, do you have anything else to say at this point? Yeah, but since both the traffic engineers are here, we're
Yeah,
talking
might as
about
well get
traffic.
them on,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we're not going to have Matt. Zach, do you want to respond to any of the comments made? Otherwise, as Jeff, by the way, that was well done, thank you. We will respond to the comments and address those issues. And I'd like to reiterate, one of the things that was brought up by the peer review consultant is the neighborhood impact, and we would certainly like to have those meetings. So we defer to the board how you, if you would entertain that.
Yeah.
And
So we'll hear from Zach or whoever it is, if he has any comments on it, and then we'll go to the public and get their comments and questions.
My name is Matt Stats. I'm a traffic engineer on the project. And I just want to add, we're generally in agreement with the peer review comments, and we're ready to work with the peer consultant to address those comments moving forward.
All right, perfect. Then we'll open it up to the public. I'd ask if you come up, your name, address, and if you could, just make sure you pull the mic to your angle, 6 to 12 inches, so we can all hear you. And if you can, try not to repeat the others so we can keep going. Thank you.
Chris LaValle, Town Meeting Rep, Precinct 4, now 10. I'd like to thank everyone for the peer review. It was very well done. I do have some hopes that the recommendations will be enacted in full, and I hope that that transportation demand management program that the peer review recommended is one that's permanent for that site, because I think that's a great thing for the community to have, no matter who the tenants or who the owners are for that building. I'm also curious as to why the other end of 129 was not addressed by either the applicant or the peer review. While it's likely that the trucks will go the other way for the highway, UPS is in the opposite direction. And if this is any type of warehouse, it's highly likely that UPS will be a significant partner for them. And so there's going to be significant traffic going in the direction of UPS towards Brick Kiln. So it would be nice if that was also addressed in the traffic study as well. I don't know if the traffic study took a look at the impact of the physical roads, but those roads right now are horrendous. And I can't imagine what they would be like if there were large numbers of trucks traveling those roads. They're in really bad shape right now due to the weather cycles. And lastly, while I appreciate the expertise of the traffic engineers for both the applicant and the peer review engineers, I have to disagree with their use case assessment. In my research of those land use codes, I found significant examples of actual warehouses that are smaller than those 1 million square feet. In fact, there's one in Westboro on 4400 Computer Drive that is the exact same size, or not the exact same, but almost the same size as what's being proposed here, with 17 loading docks. And the traffic counts that they produced are significantly higher. And it is an e-commerce distribution center. I can send this to you guys right after this meeting, but it is a real-life example, and I found a number of them in the ones I sent to you already before the first meeting. Even if the tenant isn't Amazon, one of the tenants that they proposed might be is Chewy.com. They're an e-commerce business. Their whole business is e-commerce, and I can't imagine that they would have a long-term warehouse without using it as a fulfillment center. So given the fact that Chewy.com is one of their proposed tenants that they have put up on the slide, their business model is e-commerce. And that would fit the land use code 156, the high cube distribution center. So I would ask that even if that is not a likely scenario, it would be good to see what that scenario would look like, because we don't have a tenant for this building yet. And they're not saying who the likely tenant's going to be. So let's see the entire range of what might go in there. So that way we can make a really good, educated decision on the future of this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Matt Stabs, I'm the traffic engineer again. I can respond to those comments for you. So I think the first one was the trucks going potentially to and from the UPS distribution center. Right now, we're showing 5% of our total vehicles making that left turn onto River Neck Road. And as Jeff alluded to, we're going to be breaking out the trucks and the car traffic separately. And this will show the trucks making that right turn, going to 495 to the north and Route 3 to the south, and seeing this on a figure in text form, and just trucks wanting to take the most efficient route to those major interstates will address that issue, we believe. As far as the condition of the roadways, and I think Jeff alluded to this a little bit as part of his peer review, the roads are narrow currently, but with traffic calming measures and our review of potholes, as the applicant discussed, we're gonna look at the condition of the roadway and see what kind of improvements may need to be made, and we're going to be working with the peer reviewer to address those issues. And I believe the third issue was the similar site, maybe similar size site to our site. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm not familiar with that site. As Jeff stated in his peer review, with his experience, those types of sites are much larger than ours. But this, our analysis is based on the land use code 150 and our site plan using the square footage. And that's what the analysis is based on.
And correct too, it's the parking that you have as well, meaning you have only X amount of parking, so you couldn't have all the employees you would need to be a bigger e-commerce or distribution, right?
Are we supposed to stick with that?
Yeah, so, all right, anyone else from the public? Go ahead.
Can I make a comment on the last?
Yeah.
I'm the attorney who did that project in Westboro that was referred to. I represented the developer there, and the parking count, as Jeff indicated, is tremendous based upon the size, because they have parking lots for vans, they have parking lots for the employees, and they have parking lots for, so the parking is, which is the controlling factor, but it's quite a big, it's right at the junction of 495 and
Yep.
Route 9.
Okay.
There's a large parking field.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, thank you. Next up.
Thank you very much. My name is Armin Jeknavorian. I live at 5 Bailey Terrace. Bailey Terrace is on the end of River Neck Road where Gorham Street is. My concern is the road width. We mentioned earlier, the report says it's 11 feet. In actuality, I went out there and measured the road myself the other day from yellow line inside to the white inside. At Bailey Terrace, the even side of the road, which is the south side, is 8 feet 7 inches wide. The north side north side is 9 feet 4 inches. As you proceed down River Neck Road by the fire station, it's 10 feet 2 inches on the south, 10 feet 7 on the north. The 11-foot section is by McFarland, 11-1 and 10-11. At Forest, it's 12 feet, and then it narrows back down at 129. At 129, where the cemetery, the new asphalt meets the sidewalk, the concrete, that turning lane to turn right up to River Neck is 12 feet. Those two turning lanes, left and right, are 10 feet. Now, the construction is still going on, I understand that. So with that, there's no sidewalk. Sidewalk is basically that short part by the cemetery, and then right around 199, there's a section by McFarland that goes east towards the bridge. You cross 25, the sidewalk goes away. So with that being said, your average commercial motor vehicle tractor trailer is 8.5 feet wide. It's 80,000 pounds, wear and tear to the road, safety to the road. I mean, even now with a UPS truck parked on that road, it's hard to go around with oncoming traffic. Another concern I have is off-tracking. As you know, a tractor trailer makes a turn. The trailer can't follow the right turn properly. The end of 129 with two 10-foot turning lanes, how are you going to off-track those trucks? They're most likely going to go onto the sidewalk and destroy the new construction we just had put in down there. As for my end, Chris mentioned we're not discussing the Carlisle Road side of 129 River Neck Road. From 199 River Neck Road to Target on Plain Street is 2.8 miles. From 199 River Neck Road to Moonstones is 1.4 miles. If you look at the map, the left turn, they're both straight shots to the connector. We're not looking at the human traffic, the human part of this portion. Truck drivers will do whatever they can to get to the highway quicker. They're not going to want to turn right. We all know how bad 129 is at River Neck Road. It's a nightmare, especially during rush hour. We need to be careful with this because next thing you know, trucks are going my way. They're going to go down Plain Street to the connector, which is a lot straighter and easier than a curvy 129 the other way around. I'm sorry, a curvy River Neck Road the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can answer those questions and concerns.
No, I do. Yeah, go ahead.
So as far as the roadway width goes...
Hey, Matt, I think we'll just take notes and then respond formally afterwards, so we're all set. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Go ahead.
Hey, my name is Paul Seveny. I live at 35 Golden Cove Road. 11 years ago this month, we moved in to that road, and since that time, trucks have been allowed on that road, which weren't allowed before. So it's extremely busy. I can't imagine it with any more traffic, to be honest with you. I think before I moved in, there was a sidewalk put in, and there's an S curve on that road, and it's very tight on both of those little corners. People are always hitting the curb with their tires. It's pretty tight, and it's a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, which I don't think too many people actually even realize that. I think there's one sign on the whole street. So I just want to speak for Golden Cove Road. It's a busy road right now, and I don't think it's going to get any better with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Judy DeAngelis, 217 River Neck Road. Excellent presentation. I'm wondering the impact, so between Mercury and 243, there's 4 houses on both sides. So with the development that's being proposed on 243, when we think 7 years out, the 21 townhouses and individual houses that are going to go there on that blind corner, we need to take that into account. 4 houses between Mercury and where that development's going in. The other thing is when we say sidewalks, be careful what you wish for. As you come up River Neck, you've got deep gullies right where 243 is and right at 216. So if you're going to put in sidewalks, you're coming in and you're having to fill up a considerable amount to even get a sidewalk up there. The other thing is the houses are right up near the road. So how much of our yards are you going to take for the sidewalk to have the truck then be in our bedrooms? So when you say the traffic and it doesn't meet the regular hours, as I'm laying in bed at night and that truck's going in when I'm sleeping or first thing in the morning before I'm awake, you guys don't even hear or understand how our houses shake. I'd rather have them in during the busy times than when I'm sleeping. So, thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? I'm Brian Delaney, 24 McFarland Road. I don't think River Neck Road's getting the credit for being a residential neighborhood. There's really light commercial there. I've lived on McFarland Road for 38 years, and it's all small families, small kids. There's 22 kids on the road now. I'm sure the other neighborhoods will have something to say, but the sidewalks are important to me. I've traveled River Neck Road all my life. As a kid, my friends were on the same school bus, which is another thing, is how is that going to impact the school buses when you got 3 tractor trailers trying to pull out? But, I mean, safety is a big concern with tractor trailers and coming down that road if my son is going to be traveling that road daily. Something on your point there, there was the dangerous intersection down there. What's the alternate route when there's an accident there and they need to be brought somewhere else? Are they going to, where do they make their change? Are they going to go through the center of town? Are they going to, create problems that way? And then you talked about your traffic study going down 129, going back to.
If you don't mind, can you speak into the mic?
Sure.
Because they have a hard time.
Sure. The traffic study, all previous up to this, was all on 129. It's based off of office buildings. I mean, it's morning, afternoon. That's all the traffic. We just changed the zoning for 129, right? I mean, there's going to be, they're trying to put brand-new restaurants up there right on 120. You're going to have tractor trailers going blowing by there. That doesn't benefit the town. None of this. A building this size does not make sense. And I hope you guys use common sense when you're considering this building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Eric Finney, Clark Ave. I'm the neighborhood that abuts the a project site. Thank you for the study and for your comments about trying to make improvements. Appreciate it. I guess I have a question about, because I'm looking at the trip generation, and it seems to focus mostly on the weekday. I have no idea what's allowed in terms of hours of operation. Will this cover weekends at all?
Well, we don't even know who the tenant is or what the operation would be. So if you want to ask the question, and then we'll try and get you an answer on that.
Okay, well, that's a question I'd like to have, an answer to. Yeah. And I don't know if that could be considered in the, some of the traffic study as well.
Okay.
Because the reason I bring it up is, on the weekend, there's generally more pedestrian traffic. Being a runner, I tend to run on River Neck Road. I also bike through town, and I find that getting down River Neck Road, there's not a lot of shoulders, so I have to ride in the road, and as previously mentioned, it's narrow. And then you're on your own when you get to the end of River Neck on 129. You kind of make a dash for the light and try to get in the appropriate lane depending on where you want to go. And then you do see a lot of bicycle traffic on the weekend, especially in a nice weather. So just wanted to make a comment about that. I was glad that Chris brought up his concern about a similar site and how it's being used for e-commerce, because I've been reading about the desire of e-commerce companies having small networks of, networks of distribution centers, and I think they tend to be smaller. So I wondered if the board was doing any research on that and had any concerns where these could kind of fit in maybe under the certain a warehouse codes. Even with a smaller number of loading docks. So that is a concern that I have, and I'd like to see if you could sort of look into that and see if there's anything we can do to try to prevent that.
Sure.
And there was mention about, in the traffic peer review, about looking at projects outside of, or in town. There's a project up at Drum Hill with like a few hundred units going in. The reason I bring that up is Stedman and Golden Cove tend to be a cut-through. You have all these apps that send drivers through town, and they tend to use that route to get south. I work with a lot of people that up in New Hampshire, and they tell me all the time, like, oh, you know, I cut through your town. And they come down Stedman and Golden Cove and Turnpike to avoid the connector 495 Route 3 congestion. I know it's not as bad as it was pre-pandemic, but you still have that traffic. And so, you know, you have these multi-family units that seem to be going in everywhere, and you know, I'd like to see that kind of factored in and, you know, considered as well, and then, you know, in addition to the truck traffic. And my final question to you, and I'd like to, you know, see if you have any comments at some point, is like, you know, if this goes in and, you know, everything's fine at first, and then, you know, you get a tenant in there that is like an e-commerce, and then, like, the traffic just goes to hell. Like, what's the town's recourse to try to fix all this?
Well, we can't specifically answer that because we don't know what it's going to be, but what was interested, I'll just comment on, is what he said about the parking. Because you can't have a, you know, an e-commerce or distribution without employees, right? For the most part, but I don't even want to get into that now. It was interesting what he had to say about that. It opened my eyes reading that report about what they can do.
Yeah,
Still, the trucks on the road is still an issue with the safety and everything else, but it was interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I'm just really concerned about, you know, a possible trend towards smaller centers.
They would have to come back in front of us for permitting if it was going to be, if they needed more parking, and so I think we would.
Even within the amount of parking that they have, like, I'm making it work. You know, that's all a comment that I want to make. That's all.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right,
No, thank you. I appreciate your comments.
My name is Bruce Trauma. I live on McFarland Road. Been living there for 36 plus years. Appreciate the insights that you provided. It seemed like the study was primarily focused on traffic volume, and I think one of the people on the panel here made a mention of safety. And I think there are issues regarding safety you're not going to find in a report unless you travel that road on a regular basis, as I've been doing and a lot of my neighbors have for 30 plus years. There are so many blind spots on that road that as you're driving it, you know where the blind spots are. When you come from 129 up River Neck, there's a hill there. You cannot see cars coming over that ridge. So you naturally will slow down. After you go over that ridge, there are 2 S-turns that you slow down where there are telephone poles literally right on the pavement that if you hit any ice, you're going to hit that. So there's 2 S-turns. And then if you're coming from McFarland or by the Mercury site towards River Neck, you have the 2 S-turns that are blind, especially when there's sunlight during the fall time. It's right in your eyes. You can't see anything. You come over the ridge, you can't see anything. When you go down by the cemetery, that's a double fall line. You're coming down a pitch, and it's also banked. If you hit any type of precipitation or wetness, you're going to, especially for a large tractor trailer, you're going to go right into the cemetery. So these are nuances that you're not going to see in a report. And I highly recommend that you take the time, drive up that road, especially when there's a delivery truck delivering a parcel on any side of that road. it becomes very, very dangerous. So I appreciate your time and your attention to looking at this very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Delaney. I live at 22 McFarland Road, Chelmsford. We brought it up the last time, but it's still, he talks about the tractor trailers coming in, and we're going to look for the easiest route to come in. If a tractor trailer's coming from the north, heading south on 495, the traffic that gets backed up on 495 is unbelievable there as you come across Golden Cove in that area. So you jump off, you get on the Lowell connector, you get off an industrial, you come up past the cemetery in Lowell, and you turn down McFarland Road, and you head towards the site that they're trying to develop and put in for. So I just want to have that be thought through as far as their traffic study goes. He presented that, and it was already mentioned about 243 River Neck Road. There's another housing development going in there to add to, that wasn't explained or factored into this thing. And your 219 study was all vehicles. You didn't have the tractor trailers. You get a 55-foot tractor trailer coming down, trying to turn left on a 129. Everyone's talked about it already, but you're going to have backup on River Neck Road in buses, depending on times, that's not going to be able to make that right-hand turn to even get back out to 129 to go up to Golden Cove. So the timing and the amount of seconds they're talking about that you're going to be waiting and delaying there, those numbers just don't figure. They don't add up in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anita Tonini, Precinct 4, 8 Columbus Ave. I've lived in East Chelmsford for almost 52 years. I've driven on River Neck Road my entire life. There's 4,000 residents in East Chelmsford. The primary way to get into Chelmsford is down River Neck Road. This traffic study, I'm going to repeat what everybody else said, but did not take into consideration Carlisle and River Neck Road intersection, where people are flying over the bridge of 495, and there's at least one major accident at that intersection every year. In addition, when we met with the developer, they said that they expect the tenant to partner with UPS. The shortest route from UPS to 199 River Neck is up Carlisle, down Brick Hill. It's not going on 129. It's going through the whole neighborhood. And this did not take into consideration any of that traffic. I asked this last time I was here, and I respectfully ask this again, that whatever permit you issue to this developer, you put a limitation of the operating hours. This is all residential. It's going to impact 4,000 people. And when this office building, when this was originally approved back in the early 80s to put in the original Mercury wanted to go in there, the intent and what people voted for was that this was an office park, only operated 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. People still got to, be able to enjoy their home, their backyard. They're not listening to trucks shaking their house in the middle of the night when they're trying to sleep. This was never intended when we voted this to be IA back in the 80s for it to be a full commercial fulfillment center operating 24/7. The developer had, at the neighborhood meeting, had said if the planning board had puts those limitations, they'll just put it into their lease. You're right in saying that the parking spaces do drive the amount of e-commerce, but he also said the docks do. And I think limiting that in your permit, the amount of docking space, will also help. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
One more thing. This is February vacation week. There are a lot of residents who've reached out to me who are away this week. I ask that we do another public input for parking, because there's a lot of people who are not here who,
Yeah,
We're gonna take in all the questions tonight, and we'll get back to, to answering them, and so those people will have another chance.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time. Is there anyone else or on Zoom, Evan?
On Zoom, Kara Kalf and Marlene Cote have their hands raised.
Just state your name and address and your comment, please.
Okay, I can go. This is Marlene Cody, 28 Sprague Avenue. I'm a former town meeting rep from Precinct 4, now 10. I wanted to reiterate that since I have been impacted heavily by UPS truck traffic on my street, you don't want this building to have anything to do with UPS, because as Anita said, the trucks are going to go between Brick Hill Road and Riverneck Road, which means Carlisle Street. Truck drivers may want to go the fastest route they can to highways, but they're always on my little street, Sprague Avenue, which is nowhere near a highway, so how does that happen? So human nature, GPS machines, whatever. And I also wanted to say that you can say that the parking and the employee counts have something to do with what goes on in these buildings today. However, with robotics, you're going to have fewer and fewer employees. So I honestly think, future looking, you can't say what's going to be in this building. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Kara Cull. I'm at 23 McFarland Road, and I was going to say exactly that about robotics. And I also wanted to say that the slowest traffic you'll experience on Riverneck is during school pickup and drop off. School buses drop off feels like every 3 houses down Riverneck. This is a heavily family full area. And I want to draw attention to the map that the company has made showing that the driveway goes out away from residential areas. It's specifically labeled exit away from residential areas. That's literally right across the street from my street. So it's not at all away from residential areas. That's a completely inaccurate map. And it's in fact right across the street from a school bus stop. So in the morning when elementary schoolers, a crowd of elementary schoolers is standing at the corner of McFarland, that's when you're going to be having your morning rush hour traffic in and out of that driveway. So I don't really see this as compatible at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom?
Yep, Tony.
Yeah, hi. I'm Tony Arguello. I am a resident 9 Clark Ave, probably one of the closest abutters to the space. I had a general question, and maybe I missed this. I joined a little late, 7:30, 7:40. Presentation was excellent. One question was, it doesn't sound like there's been a tenant selected overall. It sounds like there may be some e-commerce tenants being considered. And I'm just unsure how you sort of project traffic volume if a tenant hasn't even been selected yet. I'm assuming not all tenants are created equal. You can compare apples to apples. So I'm wondering how those variables were sort of factored into the study there.
Well, to answer that, I mean, you did it by the size of the square footage and the base, but if you want to answer it, that'd be great.
So given the fact that an end user was not identified, we looked at the square footage of the building, but also the layout. So the number of loading docks, the number of parking spaces, and then the general configuration of the building to make sure that as they looked at, what we were talking about, different types of land uses, as we looked at the definition for those land uses, which one most closely fit what was shown on the site plan. And that's how we kind of validated what they use for trip estimates. I think the key thing really is making sure that, as we talked about, the amount of parking spaces, that it's set at a level that's commensurate with the size of the building and the projections that they have for traffic is number one. But also the board can place conditions on the site plan that don't allow it to become an e-commerce facility. So there's ways to structure it to really keep it in bounds so that it can really only function the way that they've discussed it functioning and can't go outside of that. And then to the extent that it does, it comes right back to the board. So there is ways to condition it so that it fits within the mold of what's been presented to the town.
Okay, and is there sort of a timeline, sorry, just as a follow-up, you know, in the first year, 5 years, 10 years, and if there's significant growth or multiple tenants, you know, was that sort of factored into these projections?
So in terms of the growth of the facility itself, no, it's based on the, you know, the size of the square footage. And I think there's some discussion about, you know, if you implement robotics, it could be a more intensive use or something like that. Some of the practical limitations in terms of what we were talking about with the number of loading docks and, you know, the size of the space itself. You can have as many robots as you want, but you can only fit so much product in the square footage of the building. So there are practical limitations that even if you make it more efficient to process what's in there, the footprint only allows it to process a certain amount of product. So, you know, as tenants turn over, the size of the building isn't changing. So as long as we are consistent with the size of the building and the nature of the use within the building, that's going to keep the traffic volumes more or less in bounds. And then again, as I said, conditions can be placed on the site plan that don't allow it to get to a point where it's a more intensive traffic use.
And it's not a
Thank you.
drive-through either, right? Which,
Correct. If you start to see modifications where you start adding drive-through, that's when you start having intensification, because then you can bring vehicles into the building and physically have them loaded.
so do you take into effect robotics like they were talking about? You do, okay.
We do, in terms of the type of the facility.
Yeah.
And again, the square footage is what plays on the height of the building. So as soon as you start to get higher, that's when you start having robotics, because then because you can't have a person, you know, moving step ladders around to get product. Robots can do that. So the physical height of the building and the square footage start to determine what type of a facility it is and the amount of traffic it can generate. And so that's why keeping it in bounds to what they propose limits kind of what can go in there.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else on Zoom? Are you all set, sir, on Zoom? Anything else?
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see anyone else lined up, but if anyone else wants to speak, you can unmute yourself.
Is there anyone else in here with anything?
Thank you. Very enlightening. We took copious notes. What we would suggest is that we respond to the traffic engineer's comments, some of the comments we heard this evening. Again, I'll coordinate if with the board's discretion with the staff to explore having some type of neighborhood discussion to address some of the safety issues that were brought up and some of the controls that they are looking to see because we, as I indicated in our presentation in the beginning, we do listen and we try to respond. We have some ideas that we can share as we go through the process to address some of those. But in closing, I'd like to say, just for the record, there was never a statement or an intent to say we're partnering with UPS. So that's not something that is being discussed. So, I don't know where it came from. Thank you.
And last, though, can you also, because it's been brought up a couple of times about the bus stop.
We'll look at
So,
that.
okay.
We will look at that, yeah.
And then I'm just going to bring it around quickly to the board if there's any other questions.
Do you have an idea of how large you want the committee, how many people you want to have on it? I know if you get too large, it gets carried away. Bad.
The committee concept.
All right.
My suggestion is that before we move forward with any committee, let's have the written responses back. Let's do another go-around. I don't want to say concern, but you know, we need to quickly understand what's the width of that right-of-way. There's no point talking about widening a road, putting in sidewalks, if the roadway, the right-of-way doesn't accommodate it. Even if the right-of-way accommodates it, that's a significant change in a road, public costs. That involves DPW. So I'd much rather try to find low-hanging fruit as part of a planning board process. Planning board you're not the road commissioners. So in order, even if you and the applicant in the neighborhood wanted
saying,
to.
Evan, but I think if they had a dialogue with some people from the neighborhood and could talk
Agreed.
about some of the
Agreed.
stuff, I think that is where the low-hanging fruit
Agreed.
is that I'm looking
What we
at.
did for Princeton at Mill, we had similar peer review process. I believe Jeff Dirk was the ZBA's peer review consultant. We did have a similar kind of working traffic working group. A member of the planning board was on it, some staff members were on it, both traffic engineers were on it, neighborhood reps were on it. So I want to give that some thought. I'll talk to Tim, talk to the proponent.
Yeah, I'm not saying blow the road out, this and that.
Yeah,
I'm saying.
it's got to be manageable.
It's got to be manageable.
And
We
it's got to be,
take-
it's got to be productive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the board have anything?
I guess I'm interested in the parameters that we could place in terms of ensuring that the property couldn't become an e-commerce.
Yeah, I would just to say on that, so for traffic, your peer review consultant can help with that. My message to the board is I wouldn't get too far ahead of yourselves.
Right.
Clearly, any decision is going to have to come to terms with the fact that there isn't a tenant. And that's a whole series of conditions.
Right.
If there's a certain kind of tenant that crosses a certain threshold, it comes back. So we'll work all those out, but I think the board needs to go through a variety of other detailed reviews, create a comprehensive list well before we're contemplating what kinds of conditions. And just to kind of close a loop on conditions, as part of a special permit, your kind of legal obligation is to mitigate or to the maximum extent feasible, minimize negative impacts. So that's within the special permit decision approval criteria.
Hours of operation.
Exactly. There's a whole list of menu of options that we can consider. But I wouldn't spend a lot of time doing that right now.
No, I agree, and I hear what you're saying. It was said, and I didn't want it to get lost. Like, that seemed like an important thread to kind of grab and just put a pin in it.
You guys are as well, all kinds of things we're hearing. So hours of operation, maybe. Exactly, but the traffic ones would get teased out based upon the next round of traffic discussions.
Okay.
So you're basically in a funnel, and you're trying to narrow that funnel down as we go meeting to meeting.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment also? I think you have to be careful with the word e-commerce. I mean, as Evan just indicated, I think what you want to do is mitigate and control the impacts, because theoretically, most of your restaurants today are in e-commerce. If you look at the definition of e-commerce, it's an electronic order fulfilled by delivery.
Yeah.
So if you tried to prohibit e-commerce, then you would perhaps prohibit a lot more. But I think Evan is correct. What you want to do is focus on what are the impacts that come out of the process that you can control and provide some protections on.
Okay, so anybody else? Mike, do you have anything?
No, I think it's probably time for us to continue the public hearing.
Yeah.
And,
You guys all set
and
too?
wait for the.
Would March 9th work for you to circle?
Doesn't work for me, but I don't want to be the one.
No, we can push it out a little bit if needed, right?
Are there any other topics that
It's up to you guys.
you're comfortable moving forward with? If not traffic?
Mr. Chairman, why don't we go for the 9th? If need be, we'll continue, so.
Okay.
And we'll contact Jeff and work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for your
Thank you
time.
for your time and consideration.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
All right, so, move to continue then?
Yep.
To the
Sec-
9th.
To the 9th, second. Second. By Mike Walsh, all in favor?
Aye.
We continue the public hearing till the 9th. Do you have anything? Did you say something?
I said aye.
Aye. All right, Jim. And ladies, sorry for being on you, but I couldn't see them.
That's okay.
That's it? Well, we have
We just
some,
have the master plan implementation.
So just provided the board an update on
Yeah.
the appointments. Several committees have indicated who they've appointed. Today, the Age-Friendly Implementation Committee appointed Fred Brousseau. Fred's been involved in the master planning process from the beginning. So at this point, the Ag Commission.
Yeah,
Need
and
to get
I
that-
have somebody in mind, I just don't want
Okay.
to put his name on here until I
Okay.
warn him.
And then there's a town meeting rep, a resident at large. That's a planning board appointment. I'd look to you to kind of advise how you want to go about that process, how to do notification, how long you want to keep it open, and then if and when people respond, do you want to call them in front of a planning board meeting and do a meet and greet? So give that some thought.
just like a quick-
And then the final one is a planning board member.
Maybe like for the town meeting rep, maybe we could do like the select board did for the fire.
Announce it at the select board meeting?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And have-
Well, you know, for town meeting rep, it's town meeting rep or resident at large.
Right,
So
either
reaching
one.
out to town meeting reps is easy, we have their emails. The
Yeah, but
resident at
it's-
large,
but
we
it's-
can do it at the select board meeting, put it on a news flash.
Seems like in terms of a town meeting rep, we should wait until after elections because
Yeah,
everybody's
probably so.
being reelected
Okay,
To different precincts, no less.
to different precincts, exactly.
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah, it's just confusing.
Yep.
And I think it would be beneficial to just wait until it settles down.
Okay.
Okay.
So is there anything else we need to do at this time then?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, excellent.
We have one set of meeting minutes, don't we?
Yes. Everyone get a chance to review those? Anybody have any questions, comments on them? And if not, can I have a motion?
Make a motion to accept February 9th meeting
Second.
minutes.
Motion by Henry, Harley, second by Mike Raisback. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is it, I believe. Next meeting would be March.
Do we have new business or old business?
We just did it.
Oh, sorry, can we do old business?
Sure.
I was just wondering, Evan, if we have a update, I'm looking for the letter from Paul Haverty about the tolling of the applicability during COVID
For which project?
for 9 Acton Road.
Okay. 9 Acton Road will be on for March 9th. River Neck Road is also continued to March 9 tentatively. So it may be a light agenda. If it is, I'll work with the chair. Maybe we can put some other items on it.
Would you have both of those at the same time going?
I'm sorry?
Would you suggest having both of those going at the same time?
My suggestion is based upon the crowd tonight. I would consider going back to Town Hall.
I think we
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was saying is because of, you have 9 Acton Road and this one the same night, I don't suggest you maybe not go back to 9 Acton Road. No, maybe you don't go back to 204, or if you're going to have them, are you going to separate them?
Yeah, we can put specific times on the agenda.
Oh, good idea.
Good idea.
Then, yeah,
So
then
we can
could go
manage
back.
the crowd and manage the timing.
Yeah, because the other one, 9 Acton Road, doesn't need a room like this.
Right.
This seemed,
I mean, as nice as this room worked out better than the pack.
Yeah, this
to
worked
me,
out
it's
great.
still not an ideal situation.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I have one more thing for old business.
Hold on.
We had spoken the last several meetings, about taking on zoning issues. It's just so feedback.
Yeah, just try to be 6 to 12 inches.
I think I am.
You're good.
And so I'm disappointed that we didn't manage to put anything together for this upcoming town meeting. And so I would like to propose that we, after the election, either put something on the agenda, on a standing agenda item, or else make a subcommittee of people who are interested in this topic, and that we set a goal to have addressed several of the things that came up over the last several weeks, and have them ready to go to be reviewed by council and set up the public hearings so that we can be ready to go by, say, 4th of July, so that we won't run up against this, oh, it's here and we didn't do anything again. And so then it will be zoning.
Okay, changes in zone.
Doing a work session is fine, so that we can have it for fall town meeting, no questions asked.
I'm not disappointed about being on because we were rushing it. So, and like you said, we need to have time. So, Evan, do you think we could set up a work session to specifically work on that?
And then along those lines, we had talked about having NEMCOG come.
So NIMCOG is under contract. They will be engaging with the planning board
When?
very, very soon. That's on the zoning conflicts.
So that could be part of our work session as a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
A work session?
I
with
recommend a
that
work
and
session
NIMCOG?
for all the zoning matters.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of discussions that are going on.
All right, so we'll talk about planning a date for that. Okay, with a goal to have it for next
Buttoned
fall.
up.
Yes,
Buttoned up by the 4th of July.
sounds good to me.
Okay.
Next up,
I move to adjourn.
second,
Second.
second by Henry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Good, good meeting.
Thank you, Chelmsford Telemedia. Great